As a fundraiser, donors have told me no hundreds of times. And it sucks. When it happens, sometimes you feel like a little sick to your stomach. It can feel like a gut punch. You wonder, is it me? Did I do something wrong? In actuality, you're having a very natural physiological response to rejection, just like we talked about in our 4th episode of this series when we heard from fundraising expert Mallory Erickson. In fact, according to one psychological study, researchers discovered that when we face rejection, our brains light up the same way they do when we experience actual physical pain. Humans are wired to experience a lot of things, pain and sadness and joy. But while we may be wired to feel pain when rejected, we're also wired to be generous.
As humans, we're essentially built to give. So our brains are essentially wired through our biology to reward helping someone, essentially. So when we study the brain and we know that when you make a gift or you volunteer, that your brain releases dopamine and serotonin. So there's a biological reaction to this idea of giving. And we know this is true because we've studied this in detail, but we also know the human race wouldn't be here if we didn't have this pro-social type behavior. So one of the things that happens when we're asked to give is that our brains are trying to compute, like, what does this mean to me? Is this something that I align with? Is it something that is going to reward this part of my brain where I feel that I have this obligation or I have this affinity toward this organization and I feel this deep sense of commitment that goes beyond just a transaction?
So why do people say no to donations, and why do they say yes? In our 9th episode of our Changemaker Cafe Fundraising 101 series, we'll talk through the mental and emotional journey of a donor when they're asked to give and what inspires them to make that donation or not. And stick around to the end because we'll talk about a major strategy that successful fundraisers are using to raise money today that you can start using in your own efforts too. Download our fundraising series action guide at Changemaker Cafe. And as always, thank you to Click and Pledge for sponsoring this series. Ready? Let's get curious. As Nathan pointed out, science tells us that we are wired to give. When we donate or volunteer, our brains reward us, literally. We get a hit of those sweet, sweet feel-good chemicals when we're kind and generous. Serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin, also known as the love hormone. But what goes on in a donor's brain before they donate? It turns out when someone is presented with the opportunity to make a donation, their brain goes into decision-making mode, just like it would for any other type of decision, like buying an item or investing in a stock or RSVPing for an event. And in decision-making mode, brains have one job: evaluate risk versus reward for that action. According to one study from Caltech, the brain first estimates the potential rewards or gains of a particular action, but then compares that to the potential risk or losses involved too. This is especially pronounced in situations where there may be a lot of uncertainty. This gives us a helpful insight as fundraisers. It suggests that the more familiar a person is with the fundraiser or the cause, the more likely they are to donate, which makes perfect sense, right? Familiarity removes uncertainty, which removes some of the risk for that donor. So part of your goal in fundraising is simply get as many people familiar with your cause as possible. But a high level of perceived risk or uncertainty isn't the only reason someone might say no to a donation request.
Really understanding where the decline comes from, where the question comes from. Does it mean not now, not for this purpose, not for this project, not for this priority? Or does it mean that I have to build more trust with you, that there's some barrier between us that I haven't yet achieved? And so I think that's one of the most difficult, but also rewarding parts of being a fundraiser, is being like an investigative reporter.
There are a number of reasons a donor might say no to a donation request, but here are 4 of the most common. 1, it could be a lack of connection to the mission. In episode 6 of our series, we talked about how to align the right donor target audience with your cause. It could be that the person you're asking is thinking to themselves, I don't see why this matters to me. It might also be that your potential donor is just overwhelmed with asks. Some recent reports show the average donor gives to 3 to 5 causes per year, but are asked dozens of times per year. And nonprofits may send an average of 29 fundraising request emails per year. So if you're on multiple nonprofit mailing lists, you could be receiving hundreds of asks per year. One major reason for donor hesitation, though, is a lack of trust. The donor may be unsure of if or how their money will make an impact or be used effectively. As fundraisers, our job is to act with transparency and communicate the impacts funds will make so that we can build that trust with would-be donors. Sometimes, though, it might just be that it's not the right time for a donor. They may very well be interested, but for whatever reason, economic, overwhelm, or just life, it's not a good time for them to make the decision to give. But let's flip the script and talk about why donors do donate. We already mentioned earlier how familiarity with a cause can reduce some of that uncertainty donors assess when they're asked to give. But what else?
It really varies pretty broadly depending on the social circumstances of the individual. Sometimes it can be peer influence, right? And because I want to be associated with a charity because I have friends or peers that are associated with that charity as well, and I want to be aligned with that. Sometimes it can be a visceral reaction from something that is sparked from childhood. I serve on a board for a food insecurity organization called the Farmling Project, is because I grew up food insecure and I saw the innovation and drive of this organization, and I aligned closely with it.
Donor motivations to give are as varied as donor motivations not to give. It could be peer influence. Like Nathan said, my friends support this cause, so I want to also. Personal experience is also a major driver. They want to support an issue because it affected them personally or someone they love. Urgency and emotions are common motivations in disaster or crisis fundraising. A donor saw something that moved them to act in an urgent manner. And of course, purpose and connection. The donor sees themselves as part of your mission. When someone is motivated by that deeper purpose and connection, it can inspire them to become repeat or long-time donors too.
I think what separates people who make gifts versus people who make repeated gifts in an organization is really what is more about that alignment, right? Anyone can make a single gift to an organization, because they were arm twisted, but they didn't have a deep sense of commitment. But whether or not they stay associated with that organization is very different. So when we measure connection between people and an organization, that connection essentially changes every day. And that connection is represented differently by whether or not I raise my hand to volunteer, or I fill out a survey, or I make a gift, or I go to an event, or I don't do any of those things. And so I think at the end of the day, we have to understand, is this person associated to a level where they would likely identify with this organization over a longer period of time? Or are their motivations giving from some outside perspective, and they don't really have that deeper sense? And if they don't have that deeper sense of commitment to the organization, how can we build that?
So let's talk about a major strategy that successful fundraisers are using to raise more money today. And we're going to break down why it works and how you can use it for your own efforts. But first, let's thank the sponsor of this series, Click and Pledge. Click and Pledge is a comprehensive fundraising platform for nonprofits ready to raise money and grow their impacts. Their robust fundraising features include customizable donation forms, in-person fundraising features, text to give, peer-to-peer fundraising so you can send your supporters out to form teams and raise money from their friends and networks for your cause, video fundraising with donation links that you can embed directly in your videos, donor outreach tools to improve donor retention, a complete Salesforce integration, many other integrations, and more. Here is the thing. Some platforms charge more based on your organization's size, but not Click and Pledge. They want to grow with you. So the pricing is going to stay the same even as your donor list increases. And there are no contracts, and all of their solutions are included at no extra cost. You can learn more about Click and Pledge's fundraising solutions and get a month free using the links I'm going to leave below this video. So go get in contact with their team, ask questions, and schedule a demo, or sign up to give it a try right now. In his book, The Generosity Crisis, Nathan Chappell sounds the alarm about a decline in charitable giving across the United States. But through a crucial shift in the way we approach fundraising, we can start to turn things around.
I think one of the highlights with the generosity crisis is that nonprofits have to remove themselves from the idea that they're in the business of raising money. That we live in the attention economy, and in the attention economy, attention is harvested at scale by not just nonprofits, but by every for-profit that also wants your attention. And we know this to be true for us internally, but if we stop and pause and think about our donors are wrestling with the same thing, the demand for their attention has never been greater. And if we free ourselves from this idea that we're in the business of raising money, and instead we focus our attention on we're in the business of building connection, that's very freeing type of thought for a fundraiser. I wish I had done that, personally 20 years ago when I was fundraising. That takes that pressure off. I'm not in the business of raising money. I'm in the business of building connection. Money will follow if that connection is real.
We're all being bombarded daily with things demanding our attention. But what we're all craving a little bit more of, as Nathan says, is connection. Fundraisers who can achieve true connection with their donors raise significantly more support for their cause. That's simply because people give when they feel trust, clarity, and an emotional bond with the cause and the people leading it. That's you. Here are a few tips on how to build true connection with current and potential donors. The first is to get to know your donors. Ask them, what inspired you to give? And why does this cause matter to you? Their answers will give you a lot of insights into who they are as humans. Help a mission feel more real and tangible by telling stories about those impacted by your cause. And showcase your impacts. Build trust and excitement by talking openly about the results of the initiatives achieved with those donations. And of course, treat donors like individuals, not ATMs. Pay attention to details like spelling someone's name correctly, honoring their communication preferences if they don't want emails, and other ways to show that you are listening to them. Engage people beyond asking for donations. Invite them to give feedback through surveys, attend events, or volunteer. This helps them strengthen their relationship with your cause. Let's wrap up with our Changemaker Challenge. I'd love to hear your ideas on how to build connection with potential donors. What do you think? What would you share about your efforts or cause that you feel could inspire someone to give? Share all of your thoughts in the comments below. In the next video of our Fundraising 101 series, we're going to talk about how to optimize your fundraising efforts to increase donations online. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss it, and of course, all of our other lessons in our series. I'll see you for the next episode of Changemaker Cafe. Cheers.